Welcome to the Growth Catalyst Show, where we believe that growth could come in many forms: professional, personal, company, sales, you name it. I'm your host, Dan Mahoney, founder of Transcendent Sales Solutions and a guide to a world of growth possibilities. I've spent my career empowering companies and their people with strategies that accelerate growth. I'm here to bring you stories of these business leaders and their trusted advisors to gain insights into their journeys and learn how they fuel their own growth. Just maybe their journey could become part of your own growth story. Are you ready? Let's grow. Welcome to the next edition of the Growth Catalyst Show. I'm your host, Dan Mahoney, and I am pleased to have two guests here today. Cindi Filer is the founder of Innovative Outsourcing. After leaving the traditional workforce to raise her children, Cindi has led a unique staffing company dedicated to connecting businesses with experienced professionals seeking part-time employment. And Matt Filer is the Vice President of Client Relations and Marketing with Innovative Outsourcing, a graduate of UGA, Go Dogs. He went to work for the Chick-fil-A Leadership Development Program, where he was in charge of hiring, recruiting, and training and retention for 2 Chick-fil-A locations. Matt joined Innovative Outsourcing in 2018. Matt and Cindi, welcome to the Growth Catalyst Show.
Hey, we're so glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad to have you guys. So, Cindi, you and I have known each other for so long. We're in Vista together, and we've shared a lot. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you and Matt on today is I just love your story. You have such a great story of how you started your business, and I want everybody to hear it and learn about your business. And so, really glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me. Yes, it's been a long relationship with you over the years. So that's been really fun.
It has been. So, you went to, and I know a lot about you. You went to Wake Forest. I think I know a lot about you. But you went.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm going to find out real quick. But you went to, when you went to Wake Forest and you had a degree in mathematical economics, what was the plan on doing that?
Yeah, that's a good thing. There was no plan. So interestingly, nobody told me that you should go and pick a career based on what you actually want to do. I just happened to have a math teacher who I really liked who said, you should be a math major. And then I ran into an economics teacher at Wake Forest because you had to take Wake Forest is a liberal arts school. And so you have to take a little bit of everything. In my freshman year, I ran into an economics professor and he was phenomenal. And he was like, we have this new major that's mathematical economics, and you should be in that major because you like math and you really like economics. And so I said yes, not knowing what job that would get me. And I should have had a clue because I showed up there were only 8 of us in the major, and 7 of them were men that were very studious and didn't speak a lot. And I was a cheerleader and came in my cheerleading uniform. I was like, hey, how's everybody doing? Somebody should have stopped me and said, this is probably not the right major for you. But they did not.
Imagine if you would have really liked your instructor who was like a film studies or something where you could be, right?
I think, if anybody can talk me into anything at that point. So, who knows what I was.
You're just really impressionable in college.
Somebody should have stopped me. But what most people did with that major was actuarial work, which is a great line of work. It just wasn't the best line of work for me.
Yes.
So I became a banker.
You became a banker and went into banker where there's numbers. What was the early years for you as far as corporate out of school? Yeah,
so I took a job with First Union as a corporate lender. So I did a bunch of work on, kind of the business of finance. So with a background in mathematical economics, it was really easy to go into helping companies with their financials and helping them understand what they could do as far as loans and what their books should look like, which I never ended up doing, but it was a great thing to know being a business owner later on. Because, being a business owner, there are highs and lows financially. And I knew how to look at that from a financials perspective because of my banking years.
Talk about the pivot into HR and where that all started and how that came about.
Yeah, so that was an interesting pivot. I was a little mad about it. So my husband, we were in North Carolina at the time. I was in Charlotte, and I was in banking for First Union. And Don got in grad school at Georgia Tech. And so we needed to pivot to Atlanta. And so about that time, First Union was buying up a lot of banks down here, and it was ugly. That whole process was ugly. So they said I could transfer down here. But I kind of thought this is a good exit out of banking for me. Not that banking's not great. It just probably wasn't my thing. And so one of my husband's friends in college happened to have a dad that was fairly high up at Delta. And so airlines. And so I decided to go ask him and say, could I have a job? And he said, yeah, we have this great leadership development program. You'll be spending a couple of months with each of our senior leaders, from marketing to finance to HR. And then as soon as that's over, we'll place you in a job. And so Mother Delta, in her wisdom, with my mathematical economics major and my finance background, decided I should be in HR. And I got that placement after that, and I was so angry. I was like, wait, I'm a numbers girl. HR is kind of touchy feely. It's all, how you feel about things and making people happy. And I like the numbers. And so I was a little angry. I was thinking, do I leave Delta? What do I do? And what I found out was that's when HR was actually pivoting to numbers. It was pivoting to all the comp and all the numbers and all the statistics, driving leadership and driving the people side of the business. And I was right on the cusp of when that was happening. And I had the background and the numbers that really made it a good fit. So that's how the pivot happened. And I've been in HR for every year since then.
And it came around from your mathematics. Actually, you wouldn't have got to where you're at if you wouldn't have been there. So it's an advantage now.
Yeah, now it's an advantage. You kind of look back on those jobs. I always talk about to young people about how they're always upset about the career choices that they've made. And I'm like, until you get to be our age, you can't really look back and see, yeah, that might have been a bad job, or that might have been something I didn't love to do. But that piece, that nugget I learned back then, wow, that fits into the puzzle of what my job is today. And that's pretty cool to look back at.
So let's go back to 1995. Tell us how you decided to start Innovative Outsourcing and how it all came about.
Yeah. So
I ruined your life.
Yeah, that is
it's all your fault, Matthew.
Hand up. I'll take this one. This one was probably my fault.
It was his fault. So we decided to have Matt. And I was, at this point, I had gone from Delta to one of their subsidiaries helping start their HR function. And so we were going to have Matt, and we'd been married about 5 years. And I just felt like I was called to be a stay-at-home mom. So not that everybody should be or even should want to be, but I just felt like I was called to be home with him. So I started staying home, and I realized that I really missed work. I loved Matt, but I really missed that piece of me that was that corporate person. But I knew I was in the right place for what I was supposed to be doing. But Delta and the subsidiary and a couple of other companies, they started giving me jobs to do. Some were bookkeeping jobs. Some were, because I had this finance background, some were HR kind of jobs to do while Matt was napping. And it was kind of a lifeline for me. And all of a sudden that idea was born, is that you didn't have to just do full-time work as a mom or stay at home, because back then part-time wasn't a thing. Like, nobody knew about that gig work. That was not a thing. And so I realized that there was a place for people like me at small businesses. And so my friends, a lot of them were working at jobs and had recently come home to be moms, and they were CPAs and they were lawyers and they were HR professionals, and they all wanted some work too. So I just kind of felt like it would be a fun thing to start, and felt like a little bit of a calling to start a job to help moms, particularly at that point, that wanted to be in the workplace but still stay home with kids. And so that's what I did. And Innovative Outsourcing actually was called Filer Services back then. Yeah. Kind of a fun note. But it was started to help moms find part-time jobs and to work with small businesses that didn't need a full-time somebody.
Or nonprofits who didn't have the money for a full-time, something like that.
Yeah. And then it was Matt's fault. He's since then, at a networking event, I was told that he told me he was the co-founder.
Yeah.
And I was like, some guy met me and said, "Oh, I just met somebody that was your co-founder." I was like, who is that?
Is it wrong to say that? Yes, it probably is wrong to say that. However, it's factual.
It was wrong.
It's factual in the way that you probably wouldn't have started a company if it wasn't for me being born.
Well, that is true.
Yeah. So
But it was a stretch.
yeah, it was a
In a
stretch.
weird kind of way, he's kind of right. But
Yeah. Thanks.
Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Dan.
Thank you.
Not be on Team Matt.
Yeah, no, it's a great team to be on. We
Yeah.
take, willing participants.
Yeah.
So, Matt, growing up, I know even though you founded the company and you didn't know when did you kind of figure out the
Absolutely.
company you founded, what it actually did, and what did you have an understanding of of what your mom did growing up?
Yeah, I did. I think, I mean, we always talk about how it's funny that, around the dinner table, we were talking about recruiting and we were talking about staffing and we were talking about small businesses. And that's kind of like all I knew. But I do think, when I will probably get into the story about how I came to work for Innovative Outsourcing, but I didn't want to work for Innovative Outsourcing. Mom didn't want to didn't want me to work.
I didn't want to work for
Yeah, at that time you didn't want to work. So it was kind of this thing of like, we didn't know that was going to happen, but we had a business coach who Dan, I think Alan Keats, that he told me that I should work for Innovative Outsourcing. And I remember when I told Mom that, first she said hell no 3 times real quick off the bat, just told me it was never going to happen. But one of the big parts of it was she was like, I always wanted to express to you while you were growing up that business and owning a small business was an awesome thing, which it is. However, I need you to hear the good and the bad and the ugly from everyone that's worked on our team. So I had to go in. So when I came to work for Innovative Outsourcing, I had to go and meet I think I met with everyone that currently worked on our staff and then 2 people that had left who still had great relationships, but they had retired or something of that nature, because she wanted me to know the good and the bad and the uglies. Because growing up, it was always having a business is great, capitalism is cool, that kind of
Well,
thing.
you don't want to tell your kids when they're growing up about all the bad things that are happening at work. And so when Matt came to me and said he wanted to work for us, I was like, okay, well, all you know is how fun it is, because I never told you how,
now I
because
can
we
finally tell you the
wanna work.
truth.
Yeah.
I
Right.
can tell
And
you the
so-
truth about the company that you co-founded with me. So
Let's look at this fun thing called a P&L. It's going to be awesome. That wasn't the conversation we were having at the old dinner table. But that was one of the things of why I came to work for Innovative Outsourcing, is because I knew how much value there was. People had come up to me for, ever since I was probably in high school and told me like, hey, your mom found me a job. Like, I still I'm working for this company, now because I didn't give up my career when I was, a 30-year-old mom who hadn't, practiced accounting, or, I'm in HR still because of your mom, or, hey, we've worked with Innovative Outsourcing. We've used y'all from an HR perspective. And I really respect what you guys do in helping small businesses. And I got that a lot growing up. So I knew that Innovative Outsourcing had an impact on different people. And I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't want to work for nothing. I wanted to, work for something that had some goals and aspirations behind it and had influenced people over the years. So I thought it was a cool thing to be a part of.
So you started out of college and went to Chick-fil-A. I mean, what was that experience like working for them and then getting ready to come work with Mom?
Yeah. So went and worked for Chick-fil-A, didn't take any other interviews. That was kind of always the dream company in a sense. But they wanted me on a operator. So they called it the Leadership Development Program, their LDP program. And it was basically to be an operator, to run a Chick-fil-A. And as much as I love Chick-fil-A to death, being an operator is crazy. That it is a great business, but it just wasn't a personality fit for me. I know other people that are just amazing at it and are all over the country doing it, but they also, in the point in the process where I came to work for IO, I was director of our people. I think we had 2 stores and then the one at the airport, and I was kind of director over kind of all the people and over our hiring. And so, but then they said, hey, the next part of the process is you're going to be like an interim. You're going to open up new locations all over the country, and you're going to travel for 50 out of 52 weeks out of the year. And I had just gotten engaged. So that wasn't going to fly with my now wife, Erica, who just was in grad school here in Atlanta. And so I had to say no to that. And that's when I started exploring other options of what it would look like to work other places. And that's when Alan told me to work for IO, which ended up being an awesome decision. And that was, I mean, we're almost at 7 years now.
That's great.
7 years in August. So yeah, I mean, it ended up being an awesome, I mean, and Chick-fil-A still is fantastic. And it's a great place to work. It's a great place to learn from. My sister, your daughter, that's kind of how it works.
Yep.
She is a corporate accountant for Chick-fil-A and has drank the Kool-Aid to an extreme amount.
She loves it there.
And loves it so much. So, so it is a great place, but being an operator is no easy gig. So credits all the people that can do that.
One thing all three of us have in common, and you've mentioned him, is Alan Keats as a mentor. He was a mentor for me, and I know he was a mentor for both you. And I know you guys miss him as much as I do.
We do. He was a great guy. Alan, who was our Vistage chair and mentor, I think the thing I learned from Alan was that you pushing people is a good thing and trying to make them their best. You don't want to just tell everybody what they want to hear. You want to tell everybody the truth, and that makes them better. And leaders that do that, they're the wise ones.
Amen.
He also just,
Amen.
I mean, the cool thing that I will always remember about Alan, and I love that guy to death, but he basically was service without any questions. I think Mom mentioned like, hey, Matt's going to be looking for a job. Would love to get him like on the phone for an hour or two and kind of give him any advice. You run into a bunch of small businesses, that kind of thing. He called me and he was like, hey, we're going to meet for 9 weeks straight at this coffee shop for 1 to 2 hours. And you're going to have homework every single time. And I was like, okay, sounds great. And he met with me for 9 straight weeks, didn't ask for a dime. And I mean, nobody does that. And he was just so willing to do that. And he's the reason I work for IO.
And we've all been at that Starbucks. And, I remember the first time I met him, the first thing he said to me, I had talked to him on the phone once, is, so what's your big game? And I'm like, I don't know. What's a big game? I don't know. I don't hunt. But yeah, good memories about him. So now what is it like to work? Should I say for your mom or with your mom?
Let's take a moment for a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of the Growth Catalyst Show was brought to you by Transcendent Sales Solutions. Whether your company is facing uncertainty, declining sales, or resource limitations, Transcendent Sales has the solution. Their team has decades of experience helping businesses find alignment to meet their growth goals and transforming underperforming sales organizations into revenue-producing market leaders. They take a hands-on, results-oriented approach to solving sales challenges. Visit transcendentsales.com to learn more and subscribe to the bi-weekly Growth Catalyst newsletter for insightful growth strategies. Transcendent Sales Solutions, empowering businesses to reach new heights. And now back to the show.
4. And it's still it's 4.
It's with.
I would say 4. She would say with. I think it's been awesome. We always talk about how I think one of the reasons she said hell no at the start of us working together was, one, I don't think she knew where I would fit in the company as everyone at our company as an HR person or recruiter with over 15 years of experience.
Just say it. Say it. You're the token male. Say it.
I am the token male. I take that with pride. But yeah. And so I think when and it was also our relationship, right? Like you hear nothing against family businesses, nothing against them. You don't hear some of the greatest things about family businesses and how it kind of tears relationships apart. And we had heard so many bad things. And we consulted with a family business advisor named Gaia, and she's the best. She was the best and kind of advised us to actually do it, which she said she doesn't usually do. But I think with doing that and kind of working together, I think we found that we work very well together, and we would have never known that 7 years ago. But we've just grown into such a role, and I think it's been cool because we're a small business, and so we get to do a lot of different things, and we get to try out a lot of different things, and we've been able to grow in lots of cool areas, and now we have a staff that both of us kind of helped pick out in a sense. Some we've had for 25 years, but some of them we've gotten to hire while I've been here, and I've been able to be a part of that process. And it's cool to work together. And I think it's worked out really well.
Yeah, it really has. And I think that when he first came here, I think the big thing that we were worried about is that our family of 4 is now our family of 6, but our family was of 4 at that point, and we were really close. And we didn't want to sacrifice close family for business ever. And so we went to the other 2 in the family at the time, which is my husband and our daughter, and said, so we're thinking about working together, and what should be the parameters, and what do you guys think? And they were like, we don't want you to talk about it at vacation and all of our family dinners. And if we see that it's going poorly, we're going to raise our hand. And they really have. I mean, they said, and we don't talk about it a lot at vacation and family dinners. It does happen occasionally, and they'll be like, okay, wait a minute, we're not talking about that. So, but I think that's been really
They
good.
love to call us out. They love to be like,
oh, sure. They're
yeah,
waiting.
yeah. Like, oh, what did you guys, what deal do you guys want to talk about tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, HR. Yeah. Retention. Yeah.
We don't care.
Yeah. We don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. They love that.
Yeah.
It's their favorite bit.
So speaking, on the personal side and your family's extended, I understand on this call, we have a new father and a new grandmother as well.
Yes, we do.
Yep. So Millie is my daughter, and she was born September 19th of this year. So we're almost, last year. So we're almost at 9 months, which is crazy.
She's adorable.
She's really cool. We like her. We like her a lot. She wasn't cool at first, but she's cool now.
The first couple of weeks are really rough.
That was a lot of work, but she's a lot of work.
I remember sharing a moment with your mom when she was going to watch Millie for the first time over the weekend, if you remember a couple months ago. And I have to say, your mother is such a very confident, very strong woman, but she had a little fear in her eyes. I have to say, you had a little fear in your eyes because you left our provisors meeting early, and you're this is what I'm doing right now. She had a little wide-eyed, and we all knew it would work out.
I mean, she still had it. She took care of her a lot this weekend.
Not many people scare me unless they're under a year old.
That is kind of what we have said.
Yeah.
I think Mom has liked me since, but before 1 year old, she is very adamant that we weren't as tight as we are now.
I am not the baby.
She doesn't like babies.
Baby mom.
But you like Millie.
I do, but I can give her back.
Yeah, you can give her back. Kind of shove her back in my face. She starts crying.
That's one of the great parts of the grandparents club.
It is.
It is very much so. Well, in the time that I've known Cindi, and I've known you really since you started with the company, I've seen the company evolve a lot, and you guys have really evolved. I think it's changed, and there's definitely a lot more, and we wouldn't say energy, but you're more visible, I would say. So, and I think that's probably got to do with the young whippersnapper doing all the marketing, right?
Absolutely. He likes to say, I don't know if it's true or not, but this is what he says. He says that when he came to work for us, we were still faxing contracts. That may or may not have been true.
That's true.
But he does believe he's gotten us into the current business century. And that is true. I mean, I think he's been a really good one at, we kind of made a strategic decision kind of around COVID that there were so many people that didn't understand HR, and in COVID, they needed to understand HR because, with do we make people get the vaccines? Do we make people wear masks? Should we come into the office? What is hybrid? What's remote? There was just so many people that were small business owners that had no HR talent that we needed to get the message out there. And we started recording videos just by ourselves, just random videos that were 2 or 3 minutes just to get knowledge out to people in the middle of the pandemic about what to do with their staffs and what they should do, what they could say, what they could require, what they couldn't require. And I think all of a sudden that put a light bulb off on us about, wow, people just want great information. And how do we get that out there? And I think Matt was really good at figuring out how to take that message and that information and then disseminate it so that people would have access to great HR information, even if they didn't have an HR person in their company.
Yeah, I think our goal for the last 4 years is just become a thought leader. right? Like
Mhm.
whether it's on the recruiting side or the HR side, what are just little things that we can do from a blog, a newsletter, a 2-minute video about just a question that we've been asked a lot recently. Like, how can we just become thought leaders? And that's kind of what it has evolved into, is propping up mom a whole lot as a thought leader in the space of HR and recruiting for small businesses.
Are you saying you have to prop me up?
Yeah, I have to prop her up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's rough.
but I think it's getting that content out there of her, because she can
Mhm.
talk about it in our meeting, she can talk about it with a client. But if we get out and say like, hey, that was, that's really good, a lot of people could probably know that, or could benefit from that information. That's kind of been the difference, I think, for us, and made us a lot more visible. And we actually started doing this. Basically, there's a book called They Ask You Answer, and it's about
Mhm.
it's a guy who started a pool company in Ohio or something like that. And all he did was, like, a lot of people had questions about pools. I answered every question that I could think of, and did it kind
On
of
video.
in video, in blog, in any way, I could. And
Mhm.
we read that and we're like, okay, let's think of every HR question that we get thrown our way. Let's think of every staffing, recruiting question that gets thrown our way, and how can we get that out to people, and maybe somebody will benefit from it, maybe somebody will want to hear from us. And I think that has been the biggest difference maker, is people being
Mhm.
like, didn't I see a video of you talking about retention? And then that has started a lot of conversations, which has been great.
Well, and also right
Well,
before the pandemic, for the 3 years before the pandemic, I spent about a day a week at Delta Airlines, which is an old employer of mine. And I was in charge of like recreating their onboarding program and their executive onboarding for all of their employees. And through that, I got to be back in big business HR to figure out what had gone on in big business HR and what kind of services they were providing to Delta Airlines, internal customers. And there was such a huge discrepancy between what they got and what small business people get as far as HR. I was convinced at that point that everybody needed access to big business HR. So those
mhm.
things that big business got, that how do we take what the big business people get from HR as a service and get that same level to small businesses that may not even have an HR person. So that's when we started inventing stuff to try to figure out how people could have that kind of quality of service.
Well, and you started out in the part-time staffing, so talk a little bit about how it's evolved in your services over the past few years,
Yeah, so
specifically.
we were only part time. So we did, again, like Matt said, when we started, we never did temp work. We always did permanent work, but we only hired part time, and mostly for Christian ministries at that point, because that was my wheelhouse. Those are the people that I knew. But then quickly after that, probably within 5 or 6 years after we started doing full time work as well, and so full time permanent work as far as recruiting. And that kind of, it all depends on the economy and what's going on. And in a good economy year, we'll do probably 80% full-time recruiting, about 20% part-time recruiting. And then in a bad economy year, it might be more 50-50. And then alongside of that, we started that HR consulting area that Matt will talk about.
Yeah, I think about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of it had to do with COVID ramping it up. But I think we saw an opportunity that we were helping, her background is HR. We had other people on our staff that had the background of HR, but we were just doing it for clients that asked us about it, right? Just mentioned, we're having retention problems, or we're having culture issues, or
As we
yeah,
were recruiting.
yeah, or we don't have any onboarding processes. And we said, okay, yeah, we can help with that. And I think about 2019, I think we kind of looked at each other and we're like, HR is an area that we don't know a ton of, you know, professional services companies that are helping small businesses with their HR. There's the big ones, there's the PEOs, there's the everything, that they can do for HR, the work days, the HR platforms and stuff like that. But there was nothing that was like HR consulting that we knew of. And so that's when we kind of
It was
thought
built for small
that was
business.
built for small businesses. And so that was when we just were like, all right, let's put some effort, let's find people. And so we found a lady named Karen Moss came back to us, and she was instrumental in kind of helping us put together this thing called an HR audit that we do, where we kind of evaluate the 14 areas of HR, including compliance and all that kind of stuff. And since then, it's kind of blown up. And we've tried to give, from HR consulting with two people, a 2-person company, to finding an HR director for, 150, 200 person company, and kind of everywhere in between, having an option for HR, because we wanted to bring that big business HR to small businesses. And I think that's been something that I'm looking forward to growing a lot more in the future too, because we have a great staff that can do that as well. So that's kind of, we saw the need, and we kind of went towards that direction, and it also dovetailed really well into what we already do in recruiting.
Well, and I think when you say bring big HR to small companies, I think of it's being proactive versus reactive, because I think a lot, what I've seen is a
Wow.
lot of small companies, not only about their HR, but everything, they're very reactive.
Yeah. And we always like to say we don't want to, and we will help somebody put out the fires, but we'd like to have them not start the fires at,
Mhm.
when they get the Department of Labor letter, when
Mhm.
they get the unemployment claim, when they have their best employee leave and they didn't even know she was unhappy. Those are the calls that we get, and we kind of wince because we could have probably fixed it on the front end. And the cost and the headache would have been a lot lower. So that's
Mhm.
why we're like, how do we put these things in place so that we don't get to these bad places? And so that's kind of what we'd like to do. We love to work with a company that, says they're growing. They're 20 people now. They'd like to be 100 people. How do they create a foundation where they have that HR foundation well laid so that when they hire people, it's done well? I mean, that is just so fun, rather than call us later and say, never did that.
So I've always looked at you and asked how your business is doing as kind of a gauge on how things are doing,
Yeah.
because, and honestly, you usually have a gauge as how things are. I don't know how things are right now. It's kind of weird. It's a weird time.
It is
Costs
a
are
weird time.
like through the roof, but stock market is high and gas is high. Everything is high, but everything keeps plugging along. So I don't know what I don't know. What are you seeing in the marketplace right now, and what, from an HR perspective and a hiring perspective in general?
Yeah. So, recruiting is generally a leading indicator of the economy, right? So, we're generally on the front end, and our recovery is generally before everybody else's. So, I would say about 6 months ago, we started to see kind of a slowdown in jobs. Or the way we look at it is kind of a turn from full time to part time jobs that came our way. And so, when we see that turn, we know that the economy, or at least the labor part of the economy, is getting a little slower. I feel like it's softening. I feel like some of our clients, like construction, is not softening at this point, especially commercial construction, which is interesting because if listen to the economists right now, they're saying that that is definitely starting to slow, but we have not seen that with our clients yet.
Mhm.
But I mean, we can tell you that labor costs are rising greatly. And that is really concerning small business owners because their $90,000 controller that they hired 4 years ago, if that person leaves, is now 130 to 150. So
Mhm.
they're seeing that is almost undoable. I mean, I've had a lot of small
Mhm.
business owners say, I can't keep up. I can't keep my prices rising high enough to cover my labor costs because of how much it's gone through the ceiling. And I think
Mhm.
it's sad to us because there's really nothing we can do about it. I know you'd like to pay $90,000 for a controller. I know your P&L suggests you only can pay $90,000 for a controller, but you can't get one at that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's hard for us because we're
Mhm.
watching our clients in many cases really struggle.
Hence why the fractional and outsourced executive positions have just boomed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think I think that's also just a indicator of when someone is tentative, right? Like if a small business is tentative, then they can kind of dip their toes into like, okay, yes, we'll do a part time bookkeeper because we have some flexibility. If we don't have the money, if we don't, I can decrease their hours, I can take more, so it's a little bit more flexible. We're just seeing, 2021 to 2023. I mean, we just had a lot of small businesses that were like, yeah, I would need my time more than I need my money. Please go and recruit for me. Please go do our HR. Please go do this. We think now those conversations are a little bit different, right? Those conversations are, we're not as much competing with other recruiting firms or other HR firms. We're recruiting against companies, small businesses trying to do it themselves, trying to figure it out themselves, trying to hire themselves. When probably the last 3 years, they've just said, hey, my time is worth more than the 70 hours it would take to maybe recruit and train this job and kind of set up the interviews and all that kind of stuff. You guys just take it. Y'all are better at it than us. Now it's kind of like, okay, let me think about it really fast and let me kind of get back to you on what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the businesses, they don't know what they don't know. And so you're a business owner out there listening to this. What are some things that they should be asking themselves going, maybe I do need to be a little bit proactive on HR versus it being like a fire, like we need somebody to come in and help us now.
Well, on that, I'll talk about
It's the FLSA.
we'll talk about the HR side, but then the recruiting side's interesting too. Actually, I'll start with recruiting first.
Yeah, please.
On the recruiting side, it's gotten so interesting. I started this business 30 years ago when recruiting was, you placed an ad and then you got resumes. That whole, I know it's for those of us that have been there. I mean, that was kind of the easy way to do it. And then your recruiters, the only thing they needed to be good at is looking at those resumes to decide which is the best of the resumes, right? Well, now it's gotten so like we have a person on our staff, her name's Trisha, and she is a recruiting technologist. That's all she does. And she does the technology of recruiting. So she works all the job boards. She handles all the algorithms. She knows that bookkeepers tend to look at 10 o'clock in the morning on a particular website. So she's going to put $300 on a job at 10 o'clock in the morning, take it off and put it on LinkedIn at a different time, because that's when different people look at different jobs. And it has become kind of like a
professional gambling. Is
professional
what we like to call
gambling. And so those people, so many people will be like, how could you find us somebody that we couldn't find on our own? And it's because we have $12,000 in LinkedIn seats. We have, all these professional things that, and somebody like Trisha that's able to do her job all day long being a recruiting technologist that most companies don't have. So I don't know, you get access to a lot of better people. And then we have like a 30,000 person database. I think Matt told me it's 40,000 now, of people that don't really want to go to an Indeed or a LinkedIn or job boards. They want to just come to people like us. So we do that. And I think that's a little bit different.
Yeah. And then from the HR side, I think what we just keep updating people on and people really need is compliance updates. No one is looking at that, And so we just put out an article on like the new FLSA rule about exempt versus non-exempt employees and how that relates and how it's gone up from a $35,000 salary minimum to $58,000 salary minimum. It's keeping our clients updated on the new compliance stuff, because the Department of Labor could come after you if you don't do that correctly, and trying to kind of update our clients, because a small business is not looking at that. And the amount of people we've sent that to that have been like, wait,
what?
What did you just say? And it's like, I didn't even know it was 35,000 and now it's 58,000,
And they said, oh gosh, we've used the word exempt and non-exempt. I don't even know what that means.
What are posters? What are, so it's just a lot of people that, we've walked into offices for an HR audit and we've asked where their I-9s are and they say, what did you say?
What is an I-9?
What is an I-9? And we'll be
What's
like,
that?
oh, yeah. So it's just kind of we run into every situation with small businesses because they don't know what they're doing when it comes to recruiting in HR.
Or in many cases, like we'll go to a company and we'll do an audit and we'll tell them, they said we're losing people and we keep making offers to people and we're not getting the offers accepted. And so we find out that they're giving a week of PTO after the first year of employment. And we're like, okay, that is no longer competitive anymore. Like you need to give 2 to 3 weeks right when they start. Like that's the new thing. And they look at you like you're crazy and you're like, no, this is why you're not getting people to start with you. It's not because the great salary you're offering, but you have to offer this as well. And so some of that information we're able to give them. It's not like they knowingly didn't do it. It's just that they don't know what they don't know, like you just said. So it's kind of nice to be able to give them information. And usually they get the information and they go, oh my gosh, we do need to change that. Now, oftentimes they don't, but most of them do.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation learning about innovative outsourcing. Last question. If someone wants to learn more about your HR services or recruiting services, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Go ahead.
Yeah, either of us. So either of our emails, mfiler at innovative-outsourcing.com, cfiler at innovative-outsourcing.com, or you could visit our website and you can get in contact with us there, and we can talk to you about any need that you have on the HR or recruiting side.
We do a cool thing where we give 30 minutes of HR consulting time away. It's usually me. So I don't know what I can tell you, but I can give you top of my mind what's going on in your company and sometimes give some good advice. We're glad to do that with anybody who would want that.
I'd highly recommend anyone who doesn't have HR function in their company to take up Cindi on that offer, because she's an expert in her field. Matt and Cindi, I really appreciate you guys coming in and talking with me on the Growth Catalyst Show today.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Growth Catalyst Show. Remember, you can take these stories of growth and make them part of your own journey. Learn from them, draw inspiration, and let them guide your path of growth. I'm your host, Dan Mahoney, and I look forward to our next journey together. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, keep growing.